Thank you for auditing the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor who is your favorite band's parents' favorite music YouTuber. It is true, I get a fair number of messages, not always from band members, but somewhat often from band members' parents who watch my videos. Maybe it's the generation thing, I'm older than most of these bands. Maybe it's because I speak so lovingly of their children's music. But I say that because I'm going to be reviewing the album Skinty Fia by Fontaines D.C. And I reviewed their last album. And in their last album, Hero's Death, I talked about how the lead singer I liked a lot, and that I understood that he was Irish, but to me, as an American with my ignorant to accent ears, I heard him as sounding very British. Sounding very English. So much American chauvinist. Feel free to call me an American chauvinist right away in the comments. You just go for it. You just go nuts with calling me an American chauvinist. It's okay. It's partly true. But the funny thing was, I got all these criticisms for saying that. And I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just telling you that to my ears, I can't hear the difference. I can barely hear the difference between a Manchester accent and a Liverpool accent. Okay? That's how deaf my ears are to that. But I can tell the difference between like a Buffalo accent and a Cleveland accent. And those places are only a couple hours away. So I put this video out and it did well. I got a lot of good response. But everyone was really upset with me for saying that he sounded British to me because they're a very Irish band. They're very proud of being Irish. I'll be talking about that soon. And for me to say that was just almost offensive. But I did get a message from a member of the band's parents. I'm not going to say who. I don't want to blow them up. Who told me very clearly that the lead singer's family is from England. So it's not totally crazy what I'm saying. All of that is a way to say, welcome to my review. That's my little bit of bragging about parents reaching out to me and saying that they like my videos. And I'm really happy to be reviewing this album. I love A Hero's Death. I regret not buying the album. When it came out, it was sold out on vinyl and then I just kind of lost track of it. It's before I did Patreon to help me buy music. So I re-listened to it again recently. And it's just so good. It's so strong. And my son, who's a big music fan as well, he listens to it. And what was fun was just 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago when I reviewed it, I was just getting into this new post-punk movement, which is largely in England, but not entirely in England. And I was just starting to really admire it and see where it's going. And this whole sense of rock is not dead, rock is alive. And when rock is alive, it's going to be called post-punk. And what I find interesting is that whole wave of post-punk albums in 2020, Proto Martyr and I think there was an Idols album that year and the Fontaines D.C. The thing that I noticed was there seemed to be a real meditation on the nature of reality. What is real? What is real in the media? What is real in the real world? What is real on the internet? But not what I'm sensing is that all those bands had a fair amount of success. And the new theme is results of success, the consequences of success. We definitely saw that with Black Country New Road. We definitely see that with that great Idols album. A lot of it's tied up to the lifestyle of rock and roll and sex and drugs and rock and roll. Displacement that comes about with fame. We'll be talking about that soon. So I think it's interesting that obviously these bands that are contending with success, for better and for worse, are contending with pretty minor success on the global scale of things. If the world were more just, Fontaines D.C. and Black Country New Road would be like Pearl Jam and Nirvana were when I was growing up. That's just not the environment we live in. But still, even that amount of exposure, that amount of confusion, ends up making these albums that are coming out right now in that genre quite interesting. And it's sad. This is a very sad album. Before I get more into it, I want to make one huge shout out to the star of this album. And I hinted at this for A Hero's Death as well. The drummer. I believe his name is Tom Call. So I'm a drummer. That's my best instrument. I would rate myself as a fine drummer. Maybe even fine plus. Definitely not a good drummer. But I think a lot about drums when I listen to music. And that's part of what's been odd is, as music gets more and more mechanical, more and more computerized, the things that are lost out on most often are really good drums. And he has this lyricism to his drumming. Like he has an ability to like play drum beats that are integral parts of the song that have as much character. And I almost even want to say melody as the guitars do. Like I think if we had just an album of the stems, of just the drums, you could listen to it all the way through and fill in the rest of the music around it as you hear it. In particular, the hi-hat, which you see I put over here. I'll be doing some illustrations later. My wife was super psyched to see a drum in the living room. Apparently also this is done by the same producer of Wet Leg, which is an album I liked quite a bit. I'll include a link to that review up there if I remember. So that's pretty interesting. This Dan Carey fellow is doing a lot of interesting production, doing a lot for this British post-punk moment, this Irish and English post-punk moment. I will say I got a lot of comments on that Wet Leg thing, saying that they were industry plants. And I've just determined that industry plants is a way of identifying women. Like, are there women making music? Yes, they are industry plants. So yeah, it's a crazy world out there. You know, there's other ways of asking if people identify as female. You can just ask them. You don't have to accuse them of being inauthentic when they release a good album that, frankly, is catchy and engaging. But that's not about Skinty Fia. Let's get back to Skinty Fia. And in particular, and I may be pronouncing that wrong, the album cover. Now, I'm going to put this as one of the best album covers of the year. I don't think anything is going to catch Ants from Up There, the album cover by Black Country New Road. But like the Black Country New Road album cover, it does a great job of encapsulating the feeling of the album. It's not just a picture of the band. It's not something super abstract. It really does evoke a lot of the themes of the album, the primary themes of the album, which are resulting, that spring forth from this difficulty of dealing with fame and success, sort of making it to the minor leagues, right? Or that's a baseball term. Making it to Division 3. Is that the soccer? Is that the bad one? Is that the one that Ted Lasso is stuck in? I don't know. I kind of hate that show. Okay, so moving on to this album cover, right? So what we see is, I assume, a deer who's stuck in this hellish-looking house with a cross. We're going to get to some crosses there. And it's this real sense of displacement. Now, according to the band, I don't speak Gaelic, or Irish as they call it. Skinty Fia refers to the damnation of the deer. And some interview that I saw quoted said that it was the drummer's great aunt said this expression. It all seems kind of specious to me. It sounds like the band just came up with something kind of cool and they're telling us what it means and they know we're not going to check. I don't know. But I love this idea, the damnation of the deer. I happen to live in a nice part of suburban, somewhat rural Rochester, New York, and I have deer in my backyard all the time. Okay, well, not right now because that would be too easy, but at least 3 or 4 times a day, I will have up to 10 deer grazing in my backyard, or as I call them, 10 deers. And it's amazing. It's great to have this little bit of wildness, of nature. You know, we'll have like squirrels, and we'll have deers, and we'll have birds, and have this whole kind of scene. Woodchucks, all kind of hanging around in my backyard. And I love the idea, the unsettledness of this image of imagining one of those deers in our house. And if one of those deers, I'm going to really lay into that S, feel free to correct me in the comments. If one of those deers were to be in our house, they would be in hell. They would be in a state of damnation. They would be confused. They wouldn't know what to do. They would feel like somewhat familiar because they've looked at this house. You know, they're trying to identify if one of us is going to come out with a crossbow and decide that we're going to have deer for dinner. So what an interesting idea that one person's domestic space is another person's hell. What a great way to express displacement. And this album is largely about that displacement. The displacement that comes from a bunch of people from Dublin. That's what D.C. stands for. Dublin City, from Dublin, the city in Ireland, who have now moved to London. Why did they move to London? Why did John Lennon move to London? Why did the Smiths move to London? Why does every band that makes it in Great Britain end up moving to London? Why does every band in the Francophone world that makes it end up moving to Paris? Why does every American musician who has success moves to either New York or to Los Angeles? It's just the way the culture works. the centralization of power, the centralization of culture, of reach. It's where all the people are, and so that's where they go. So this album can be seen as like a petty complaint. I don't want to live in London. Wham! Or it can be seen as something a lot more profound, like that concept of a deer in a house. The true displacement of living in a place. Of course, we have the colonial relationship between Ireland and England. I'm not going to get into that whole history. I am wearing a green shirt. I did think of that this morning. See? And I did come from Boston, so I'm very aware of at least Irish American culture, which is very different than Irish culture. But this displacement of living in London is the real theme. It reminds me a lot of this whole album, and this is going to piss you off. And frankly, it pisses me off. I'm going to write myself a comment saying, Sky, how dare you do this? You can't compare every band to the Smiths. But I'm going to. Not because they sound like the Smiths. Although this is a sad album that's also catchy and you like to listen to, which is how I feel about all the Smiths albums. But in this sense of being from outside of southern England orbit and having to go there. When you think of a song like London by the Smiths, I went to London and I went to the YWCA and got a back scrubber job, all that stuff. You know, like they really do sing about that difficulty. Morrissey really does hammer home that distance that he feels from the north. And I don't know, I'm not an expert on British, obviously on British accents or cultural sense of place, but I definitely understand it, that London represents such an ambiguous place. Also, we have this benefit of biculturalism. So even if you don't think that London and Dublin are that different, if you're an American like me and you can't possibly believe that it's that different, it does bring added perspective when you live in a different culture. And that can be within a country, that can be within a continent, that can be within a world. I lived in Paris and I felt displaced, and I lived in Los Angeles and I felt displaced. I felt like a deer in a house when I lived in Los Angeles. I actually thought of a funny example. When I moved to LA, like all my friends were from Boston. And when I'd meet new people and I discovered they were from Boston, we would become friends. And we'd complain about the lack of good pizza and how no one knows how to tell a joke and there's no sarcasm and everyone's been soft. There are even bars in Los Angeles that are called Boston bars where you go and watch the Red Sox play baseball. It's this weird expatriate experience within the United States of America. And in an interview that I read with the Fontaines, they said that that's what's happened to them. They've been in London, yet they've still kind of insulated themselves with this kind of Irish culture. So I am tempted to see this as being a petty thing made by a band who's just having a little bit of trouble. But I would prefer to enlarge it to say it's a general album about displacement, especially displacement coming from a marginalized place going into a centralized place of power. Because of that, one of the other themes that we find here is a lot of, okay, I'm going to use a word here that is not the right word, so I'm going to define it. Irish nationalism. Wait, cultural nationalism, which is the only acceptable form of nationalism, if you ask me. There's a lot of insistence on Irish culture, and I don't just mean Irish movies and books, although things are mentioned in terms of literature, but really, like the title of the album, the fact that the title of the album is in Irish or is in Gaelic, that's important. That's really emphasizing this cultural identity. And that's what I think we see, and that's what happens to me when I live somewhere else. All of a sudden, all I want to do is listen to the Cars, and I want to listen to the Modern Lovers. I want to listen to things that remind me of home. I want to be in that culture because I feel so alienated. Apparently, according to a comment that I read on one of my other reviews, they all met in college and bonded over their love of poetry. That also comes through. We have references in this to Nabakov and Joyce and a movie written by the great writer Dalton Trumbo. So there's a kind of smarty pants theme in this album as well. As well as just a lot about drugs and rock life. The drug stuff is very kind of oblique, but I get the sense that these guys are going through something and they're not done with it. That's the sense that I got. In a similar way to the Idols album, where the Idols album, the last one they released, it feels like they went through something and then they got over it and then they went back through it again and then now they're not going through it, but they think they're probably going to. Part of what made my first review of their second album challenging and interesting is I just get so many comments, oh, but their first album is so much better. And that was true across the board. That was true with Idols, that was true with Proto Martyr, that was true basically all the post-punk bands. And I think that's because people are stupid, right? They like what they like what they're used to, and they hear something new and they get frustrated and they don't like it as much, right? When I say people are stupid, I mean me as well, right? You have to really try to put yourself into the future when you listen to a new album by a band that you really like. So my initial take is that this album I don't like as much as A Hero's Death, but mainly because it's not as hooky. Televised mind off that last album, you know, like just that line. Just that line just is always in my head, and there's so many hooks. And we have some of that here. Everyone gets a big shot, baby. We have some of those lines here, but this is really trying to do something else. I think more than that last album, this is an album. A collection of songs around a couple of themes that are all tied together. It feels cohesive. It feels like a great work of texture and depth. And I predict by the end of the year, thanks to my Patreon supporters, I'm going to be able to buy both of these albums. And I'm going to, because they're great. My son just told me this morning that he listens to their stuff on Tidal. So I'm like, man, we got to buy it. If you're listening to new music, we got to buy it. I suspect that I'll end up liking this more than that other one. But initially, I don't. So let's get into some of the album. 60 minutes in here. I'm doing well. I don't like the lighting. I got a new camera. I don't like the lighting. I think I look like a cadaver. I don't know how to fix that. This album's actually kind of cadaverous, so that's okay. There's a lot of death in this album. So. For every album, I try to have what I call a stamp, or my homework, an example song for you to listen to. I'm going to choose the song I Love You. I'll include a link to it up there. Feel free to go and listen to it, fall in love with it, listen to the rest of the album. 3 days later, be like, oh, Professor Sky did a review of that album I've been listening to. I should go finish the album. This, I think, best depicts the controlled epic mess of this album. Like, not mess, but there's a sort of like beautiful sloppiness to this album that's not even sloppy, loose. That's the word, Sky. An epic looseness to this album. So it has scale, which a lot of things that are loose don't have scale because I feel like they're just thrown together. Nothing here feels thrown together. But it has this looseness to it. There's a lot of great movement through this song to different parts, lots of great melody, and of course, the drummer rules. Just absolutely kills it. God damn, do I want a stem of this song just to listen to this drum line. There's like this hi-hat. So the thing about a hi-hat, right, is, it's got a couple different states of being, right? It has open. It sounds like that. And then it has closed. And one of the things that a good drummer does is they know how to do the closing hi-hat sound. If you just listen to the opening and closing of the hi-hats on this song, the syncopated way that it's played, you'll get what I'm saying about this lyricism of his drumming. And I don't know. Please listen to 1 minute and 37 seconds in and tell me, because he does this interesting thing with the snare where he does something sort of like what's called like a ghost note, kind of like a double snare hit. I think he screws up. I think he doesn't hit it exactly right. I think he's off by like a half a beat, which I would love. I predict that's going to be the next thing that rock producers are going to do. They're going to ask people to make mistakes. Because once you can pitch and pocket everything, who wants to hear perfection anymore, right? Anyways, just so great. And what's funny is like, it's not like the guitars and the bass and the singing aren't great on this song as well. The bass comes in, eventually some like a plucked kind of clean guitar, maybe kind of Rickenbacker style guitar, then acoustic guitar, and then the way the singing goes, I love you, I told you I do. It's sung in this kind of odd rhythm, almost like a Cure-like guitar solo here, and just goes through all of just this long space and this great dynamics, and at certain points it gets almost very rocking, and at points it gets even more quiet. And when I listened to it, I thought it was a sort of cynical song. This is the thing. I don't hear his words that well. You can't help it, okay? You just can't help it. You can't help which you don't hear. So I thought it was kind of like a song about like a love relationship dying and about how you lie to people when you say you love them sometimes. Turns out I was totally wrong. According to an interview, this is all about a mother and baby's home in Galway, which is another interesting aspect of this. So that was a thing where in Ireland and in much of other parts of the Catholic world as well, there'd be these things that would be run by the Catholic Church where if there were young women in a precarious state who probably don't want to carry their baby to term, they're put into this place, they give birth, and quite often the mothers will die, quite often the babies will die. Sometimes the babies will be sent to other countries like America to be raised in places like where I grew up in Boston. And it's just a terrible abuse. It's a terrible system of abuse based on some kind of system of faith. And what a great song to target. What a great thing to target. So that's what this song is actually about. It gets very political. He talks about different political groups in Ireland. What do I know? What do I know about Irish politics? Basically nothing. But what I like is no. Let's requalify that. Absolutely nothing. But there's. But it doesn't have to be about Ireland. You don't have to know the names of the two different parties that he references in this song to understand. You don't even have to know about this actual scandal to know it's a song about power and the abuse of power and the way that the downtrodden are forgotten. Say it to the man who profits and the bastard who walks by. Perfect. Perfect. That is a perfect lyric. Say it to the man who profits and the bastard who walks by. The entire system is blamed. The people who allow it to happen and the people who do it. And the bastard who walks by and the bastard who walks by. Say it to him 50 times and still the bastard won't cry. Okay. Now, I heard him say, I lied. According to Lyric Genius, whose percentage of accuracy is not 100, it says, would I lie? Either way, it's interesting because it's this sense of I love you, I love you, I love you, and it's a lie. Just beautiful. And the whole song ends with this electric guitar kind of weakly played, and you've been on a whole journey. You've really been through a really beautiful, sloppy, epic moment. So I'm going to go through the rest of the album a little bit quicker now. The lighting has changed. Do I still look like a cadaver? First song is In Our Great Godeo. Again, it is in Gaelic, okay? And actually, wait. Before I do that, I want to say one more thing about that previous song. England, London, little fact, is not a super Catholic place. Matter of fact, a lot of that Protestant stuff was really spread through England. So what's interesting is that previous song is explicitly against Irish politics, and specifically against the dominant religion in Ireland. So that's the other part about being bicultural, is you're more aware of the real weaknesses of your home culture. When you go away, ask somebody who lives in France what the problems are with America, and they'll have a different and sometimes better view than somebody who never left, as an example. So I think that's kind of interesting to have that. This album isn't just like, Oi, England people, or knobshite, whatever it is they say over there. I don't know what. Halfway through, I thought maybe I should try for an Irish accent, but I don't even know how to start an Irish accent. Listen, okay, I just did King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, and they had an album whose title I couldn't pronounce, Omnium Gaprathium, whatever the hell it is. Now I got these guys. But of course it's different, because part of what I love about this being in Gaelic is I teach French, right? I teach another language. Language really matters. Language is a form of representation. When you have a language like Gaelic, which has been repressed by a central power like London for hundreds of years, singing in Gaelic or saying anything in Gaelic is actually a political act. It is a voice of the voiceless trying to speak for those who have been downtrodden. This is true in hip-hop made by immigrants when in any country, if they use the language of their home country mixed in with the language of their adopted country, that creates a sort of in-group and out-group, and only the people who belong to both cultures can really understand. That's what this song is. That's what a lot of this album is. It's all in that realm of like, who understands all of this? So, in our Gocorith Go Dio apparently means in our hearts forever. And there's a whole story about how this was written on a woman's gravestone, but they refused to allow it in England because it was in Irish and it would be seen as a source of division in the country. And of course, that's one of the great problems, like how do you have minority languages? How do you allow them to exist? Should you squash them? Whatever. But just such a beautiful, epic opening to this album with this high singing in Gaelic. Again, listen, I'm a stupid romantic American, so I am picturing some beautiful green pastures with like a wooden. I'm not gonna lie, I'm thinking of that place in Star Wars. That little island that they go to in Star Wars with the porgs. I'm picturing that island. Okay, I'm picturing that little porg island, and I'm picturing someone singing in one of those little stone huts. And then I'm picturing the band playing music in front of it, and this guy with his great punkish voice. Gone is the day, God is the night. If you ask me after listening to it for the first time, I would say, God is the day, huh? That's an interesting lyric. Oh, gone. Gone is the day. But beautiful, mournful. He's able to whisper, he's able to yell. Slight modulation of the sound before this instrumental break. And the drumming. Again, the drumming is great. It actually reminds me here, a little bit less lyrical, but reminds me a little bit of the frenetic style of Mitch Mitchell from the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Has that kind of energy. And if you have never listened carefully, because all you hear is Jimi Hendrix, I don't blame you. But Mitch Mitchell is an amazing drummer, and this has kind of that, like there's almost a drum solo in the middle of this song, but you can't really tell because of all these gauzy, beautiful layers of music that are over it. Even some flange and this angelic chorus to go out. Then we get to the next song, which might be my favorite song on the album. I can't tell. I like so many songs on this album. Big Shot. It's not a cover of the Billy Joel song, I made sure. Simple, strong guitar line that just like leads over everything. Just a very, very strong declarative guitar line. And then the chords come in, they're sort of these shaky back and forth chords. There's a very, very Nirvana-ish feeling at times to the way these kind of, or grungy feel. So like if you play, this guitar's not in tune by the way, if you play a chord all the way through, first you gotta get the pick out of there. If you play a guitar all the way through, you play all the notes. But like, if you're trying to get for kind of like a slushy feel, you can just kind of play the top two notes. So that's kind of one of the things that people do in grunge instead of just doing. It's a slight difference, but that kind of simplistic playing on the guitar happens quite a bit on this album, and I quite like it. And here, I'm just full of props, huh? This is how you know I'm a real drummer, is I can do that trick. The coolest moment of the album is in the instrumental bit of the chorus. So I cannot describe to you how much I like this. It's weird how much I like this. Like, I interrupted several conversations while listening to this album. Like, listen to the damn hi-hat, would you? Listen. So if there's like 8 beats in a measure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He plays this hi-hat on the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then gives it this space on the 1, on the 8 and the 1. And the thing is, what he's playing is that I told you there are 2 different states of a hi-hat, open and closed. But a good drummer also knows that third state, that liminal state in between open and closed, which you can play a lot of different ways. A lot of heavy metal drummers drum that way, like Metallica drums that way all the time. A lot of heavy metal drummers never take it off that. But this has so much expressive possibility. So in this song, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know why, it's just such a good sound. It just feels so right. And the whole time there's a tambourine playing on the 2 and the 4. So that while it could be kind of a weirdly disjointed rhythm, it's still maintained. And then the bass is doing a thump, thump, thump. Almost like a heartbeat thing here. So much atmosphere. I guess the lyrics are about fighting with ego. I don't know. No offense, the lyrics seem great, but who cares when you have this drummer doing what this drummer is doing. And the guitar line doing what the guitar line's doing. Next song is How Cold Love Is. Loathe. How cold loathe. He continues again with that kind of slurry, half on, half off hi-hat, but then he also does, I'm sorry to keep talking about the drums, but here's the good news. I'm pretty sure no other reviewer is going to spend this much goddamn time talking about Tom Call, talking about that guy's drumming. So you at least only have to deal with me, right? I don't know what everyone else is saying about this album. I don't read other people's reviews. I don't usually watch them either. But I'm going to tell you that not only does he do that, but then he also plays this cymbal, the bell on a cymbal. So every cymbal has like a little bell. It's the thing on the top there, which has that kind of high sound. He plays that on the ride. So you have this kind of slurry sound over here and then this clear sound over there. More that kind of slushy guitar lines as well. But it's not all grungy and slushy. It's a ringing guitar line that goes over. And then this almost mantra-like line, how cold love is. I don't know how he says love. He says love with both too many O's and not enough. According to Lyric Genius in some interview that he said this is about addiction, which is interesting, and an addiction in a family. So I don't know if this is just me projecting, but I find it interesting. This could be about the feeling you have when members of your family are addicted, and this is how he describes it. They sit in their room, they all consume, they fall in their bed, they want to go dead. I don't know if you've ever lived with anybody who suffers from addiction, but that is a very good description of how it feels to be the person living with that person. Jackie Down the Line is the next song. This is their first single, but I actually don't like this song that much. This is my least favorite song on the album. And what's funny is it's the most clearly drum-led song. Like, starts off with the sound of some drums. It's fine, more the kind of minimalist 2-chord thing going here, some kind of ironic do-do-do, la-la-las. But I don't know, he talks about someone named Sally. And doesn't Oasis have some song called Sally? Like, hey, Sally can't go. Sally can ride. Sally can wait. Sally does something in Oasis. And I kind of feel like if you have an accent at all, I'm looking at you too, Australia, anybody. Hell, if you're from the south of America, if you have anything other than just the most banal American accent and you say the word Sally, I'm just going to think of Oasis. I'm sure I just pissed some people off there. But let's move on to Bloomsday. Remember what I talked about, cultural nationalism? So my ancestry is a little English, a little Irish, but largely Scottish. And part of my pride, all Americans, by the way, if you don't know this, Americans have weird pride in their ancestry, even though we have nothing to do with it. So, I'm Scottish, it doesn't matter if it's been hundreds of years, I'm Scottish. And one thing I will say about Ireland and Scotland is that their cultural nationalism rules. Like, you can't, it's going to sound like I'm throwing shade. You can't have a Scottish Independence Day, right? Like, that doesn't exist. So what do they celebrate instead of a great military victory? The poetry of Robert Burns, a great and very difficult to understand poet if you're not from Scotland. And in Ireland, they celebrate the work of James Joyce, a great novelist, on Bloomsday. So this song is called Bloomsday in honor of that, and apparently this is a song about coming to terms with being outside of Ireland. It's talking about being in Ireland on Bloomsday, drinking with the tourists and fighting in front of them, oh, to be young once more. But the chorus is just saying Bloomsday over and over again, this nice guitar lead. The guitar line actually reminds me of a good Nick Cave, like a Let Love In era Nick Cave guitar line, like the strong, really loud guitar lines that are very clear. Nice little drum thing in the post-chorus as well. But just the chorus is just saying the word Bloomsday over and over again. It's very dark. It's very sad, and you feel that sense of displacement. Again, more good syncopated hi-hat hits, and then a beautiful moment of guitar harmony at the end. I know my reviews are long, and you can please subscribe if you like it, and smash the like bucket, and leave a comment that you like it. Whenever I find those little details, like the little hi-hat stuff or like this guitar harmony at the end, it's because I think a lot of people watch my reviews who already like the album and they just want to share the excitement. So I also, not only am I trying to tell you this is good and here's why, but also I want to be part of this conversation with you, Like maybe you could leave a comment about how have I been sleeping on the bass player. Like, on the next song, the bass player is amazing. And I haven't talked about the bass player yet on the entire album. So let's talk about Roman Holiday, which starts again with a funky drum beat, a little more reverb all around, a little more spacey, kind of like a rock guitar in the beginning that plays like a nice descending melody, and then sort of becomes almost like a solo. There's like a 12-string guitar, I think, as well, and probably the best bass work on the album. I find this interesting because the title Roman Holiday refers to the movie written by Dalton Trumbo. I suppose it starred some famous actors as well, but I'm not going to mention them. But it's not about the movie. I think it's about the idea of taking a holiday in Rome. But we have to think more clearly, everybody. Rome. What does Rome mean? Well, London is Rome. New York City is Rome. Paris is Rome. Rome is a symbolic place of centralized cultural, political, economic power. So that's what I think this is. I think he's describing his life as being in Rome. Baby, come on, whose side are you on? I don't want to see the queen, I already sing her song. While they're snuffing out hopes, they're blotting out suns, they claim to know the form in which genius comes. I love this line. I haven't heard a lot of music from British colonies, for lack of a better term, like Ireland or Canada or whatever, or anywhere else where they recognize the queen as showing. I'm sure I just pissed someone off there. Feel free to get mad at me. Correct me and say sky, because like all good Americans, I sometimes mess up using the word British when I mean English, which is already a problem. So feel free in the comments to tell me every single time that I did it wrong. Call me an American chauvinist. We're all set. So, I love the idea though. I don't want to see the queen, I already sing her song. The idea that everybody has to sing a song, God Save the Queen, which refers to the queen, and many people don't actually want to be a part of Great Britain. The Couple Across the Way is a complete out of nowhere song. Again, according to an interview that I read, they were going to do a double album where one half was going to be just rock, the other half was going to be sort of more traditional Irish music. I suppose they say that's what this is. It's an accordion. At a certain point, there's a little piano at the end, but it's nice. It breaks up the song quite a bit. It doesn't quite fit thematically with the rest of the album. As far as I can tell, it seems to be about like being an old couple and seeing a young couple move in across the way. It's sort of like a weird sort of imagined song of being an old couple. I forgot the thrill of lies. Across the way moved in a pair with passion in its prime. Maybe they look through to us and hope that that's them in time. That's a great statement about love. You know, puppy love is great, but eventually it becomes dog love. You know, eventually it gets old. But dogs are better than puppies anyways. So, next song is called Skinty Fia, which refers to that album title, which was also in that Roman Holiday, and goes back to this concept of the damnation of the deer. The deer is the Irishman. The damnation is being in England. It feels as though this is sort of about like drugs and about this life and all this atmosphere. The music here, and I swear to God, if you don't hate me yet, if you, the Irish viewer, don't hate me yet, you're going to hate me now, because you're sitting there, oh dear God, Sky, don't you dare just name some goddamn Irish band and say this sounds like that Irish band. It sounds like the Commitments. No, it reminds me, it doesn't sound like, but it reminds me of U2, but not U2 Joshua Tree U2, like the Zooropa Achtung Baby era, where they started to get just a smidge alternative, a smidge weird, some altered drums, great drum work, some kind of industrial sounds, a little bit of that Eno-ish U2 90s era, which is my favorite era of U2. It's actually the only era of U2 I like. You know, I love Zooropa. I think it's a great album. The rest of their stuff I'm kind of mezzo on. But like, it reminds me a little bit of that. But please don't get mad at me. I know I'm an American chauvinist. You've already told me that 3 times. You're going to break your keyboard hitting enter. Great industrial breakdown with some industrial bits there. Some awesome lyricism. Like a good example of the lyricism on this album. I bet you had your smile for the open mile. It's evocative, but it's not clear. I bet you had your smile for the open mile. Then we had the stamp, I love you, and then we get to the song Nabakov. And Nabakov. Right. That's how you're supposed to say it, right? Not Nabakov. Yes. Whenever I think of Nabokov, I always think of that terrible line. One time I asked my brother, I was like probably 10, my brother was 22. I said, how do you know when something is a bad lyric? And he said, well, if Sting would write it, it's probably a bad lyric. I asked him what he meant. And he quoted the line from Don't Stand So Close to Me. He stands and then he starts to cough. Just like that old man in that book by Nabakov. And for my whole life, I've just always kept that in mind, is that's what bad songwriting is. This is not like that. I can't quite tell. I've read a little bit of Nabokov, not too much, not enough to be an expert. But apparently they're trying to write sort of in his style, more great lyrics here, very bass heavy. There's like a drop, and then also almost becomes like a Tool sound. Like it sounds like kind of metalish. Again, more of that kind of slurry hi-hat stuff. And then it becomes almost like a full funk song with all these changes that are happening, like flanges. And it's really nice. I really love the layers. It almost ventures into the realm of shoegaze, like a wall of sound with all these voices in back. And we have this theme over and over again of sort of what I would call domestic submission. I believe he says, I'll be your dog on the carpet. I believe that's what he says. He says something about being your dog. It kind of ties back together in with Now I Want to Be Your Dog by the Stooges. I talked a lot about the Stooges and proto-punk in my last review. I'll put a link to it at the very end in one of the little rectangles. You really should watch my Hero's Death review. I go into sort of how we should think of this, not as post-punk, but as post-proto-punk. So music now sounds like the music that led up to punk, not the music that followed it. But it's interesting, and this nice idea of sort of like a bad relationship, but you're so good looking, and so many layers and layers. So there's my review of this interesting bummer about Displacement, this really cohesive album, which I think will only improve in time. I do a thing for my Patreons where I ask them if they like a shout out. So I show the list of everybody once a week because it's a crazy ass list and I can't show it every time. And also, if I'm wearing a shirt like this, you'll see the stains on my armpits. It's no good. So what I do is if every time I do a show on Tuesday or Thursday, one of my other shows, I just say, hey, who wants a shout out? And to credit to all 64 of my Patreon, they don't just say, I want a shout out every time. Like they really wait to say. So shout out to Ben Hansen and to Pauline, who are both very excited and big Fontaines fans. Fontaines D.C. fans. So thank you for supporting me in the channel. I'll be taking your money and buying Fontaines music. And oh my God, Fontaines are playing. They're playing this weekend, like 3 hours away from me in Cleveland. I don't think I can go. I don't have tickets. That's the main issue. Do I have time? It's like the end of the semester and I haven't finished grading all those goddamn mini compositions. Anyways, I may go to the concert. I haven't decided yet. Have you seen them in concert? Did you like this album as much as the last one? Why don't you tell me? All right, well, until next time, there's the camera.